A $3.4 billion commitment in improving women's economic security, physical safety and well-being is described as a step in the right direction. Some are concerned about the package and containing so-called band-aid measures rather than practical policies that will lead to systemic change. One of those systems is childcare, though, which is still considered to be the biggest barrier to women returning to work. More than half of the spending targeted at women in Tuesday's budget is designed to make childcare cheaper, but not until next year. However, critics say tinkering with subsidies doesn't work because providers will still increase fees. Jane Hume is the Minister in charge and she joins me now. You've got a number of things in your portfolio, superannuation as well, but let me talk about this women's security package. The bulk of it is childcare. How many children would this cover? And are the productivity gains really there, do you think?
Well, it's expected that that $1.7 billion investment in childcare for families with second or subsequent children, making the subsidy up to 95% for those families, for those children, those second or subsequent children, will in fact allow around 40,000 people to do an extra day of work every week. And that will contribute to the economy by about $1.5 billion in GDP per year. So it is a terrific outcome. We know that childcare is one of the things that really does move the dial with workforce participation for women. And in fact, the BCA said that around 90,000 people last year didn't return to the workforce because of the cost of childcare. They named that as their biggest barrier. So we believe that this very targeted measure is what's going to move that dial. We know that if we can increase female participation in the workforce by around 5%, it would actually add $20 billion to GDP over the forward estimates.
There's not a lot of competition in childcare centres because essentially people do what it suits them practically. So you see a lot of high fees in childcare centres, as you would know, but there's nothing in this budget that I can see that would stop these centres just hiking fees and absorbing that money that taxpayers are essentially funding.
Well, when we originally reformed the childcare system to introduce the childcare subsidy back in 2018, there was an hourly cap introduced then. But moreover, we've said that if we see fees going up for childcare, that's something that we could potentially ask the ACCC to have a look at.
Okay, so have you asked the ACCC?
No, we haven't yet. We want to see these new reforms rolled out first, and if we see that childcare fees go up in response, well, that's the time when we're calling.
But surely it should have been done before anyway. Why isn't the ACCC looking at childcare fees anyway? Because they seem to go up. It's, you know, in some capital cities, it's $180 a day.
Well, we're hoping that this second or subsequent child subsidy, up to 95% for that second or subsequent child, and particularly that targeted to low and middle income earners, and specifically for those families that are working or studying or doing volunteer work, that this will make that difference to the cost of childcare for them. They're the ones that are disproportionately carrying the burden of the cost of childcare.
We got our own booklet this year in the budget. It's thin, but a lot of it is, I mean, childcare is now rebranded as a women's issue. Isn't it a family issue?
Well, it is a family issue, but it disproportionately affects women. We know that women tend to be that secondary income earner in a family, and they're the ones that are making decisions to stay at home, to not take on those extra days or that extra hour because their effective marginal tax rate tipped over to a point where it simply wasn't cost effective for them. And it's all about trying to return women to the workforce. So yes, it's a family issue, but it's also an economic issue too, because we know that when women enter the workforce, take on more full-time work, less part-time work, that actually genuinely turbocharges the economy.
Now, let me ask you about superannuation, because this is the bulk of your policy area as well. Now, in super, is there more scope to bolster the system to pay for aged care somehow?
Well, we've already made significant changes to the system around efficiency, you know, making sure that we get rid of those duplicate accounts, lower fees, improve those insurances that are eroding balances, and also trying to get rid of that huge number of underperforming super funds where people languish in them. Your Future, Your Super changes that are about to enter the Senate, into the House, I think, anytime soon, is more about transparency and accountability. But the announcements that we've made in this budget are more about flexibility, making sure that people that are in the system already, and particularly those that may have already retired, can continue to contribute to superannuation if they're over the ages of 67 to 74, and can use the downsizer contribution, not just at the age of 65, but now down to the age of 60, to sell the family home and make those contributions to superannuation above and beyond their voluntary contributions caps. And not only that, that downsizer contribution is actually a supply side lever in housing affordability too. Something that the federal government doesn't have a lot of control over is the supply side of housing. That really is the purview of the states. But we're expecting around 76,000 people to take up the opportunity to downsize over the next 5 years, freeing up around $10 billion worth of property so that larger family homes can move to that next generation of younger families.
Well, we hope that does do something to the house prices. They're crazy at the moment in capital cities in particular. Jane Hume, good to see you. Nice jacket.
Yeah, right back at you, girl.
See you soon.